And as a prompt for our discussion on this subject matter, let's join our correspondent Oyemi Ajayi for the background report.
Section 1 of the Bank Employees Declaration of Assets Act 1986 makes it mandatory for every employee of a bank to make full disclosure of assets upon employment and annually in subsequent years. The law under Section 7, subsection 1 stipulates that it shall be an offense for an employee of a bank to own assets in excess of his legitimate, known and provable income. This has a spelled out penalty of 10 years imprisonment. For a long time, this part of the Constitution has been left fallow without any of those concerned respecting it. But with the appointment of the new chairman of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, Abdulrasheed Bawa, the emphasis and revisitation of this part of the Nigerian Constitution becomes a part of ridding the country of corruption and money laundering, at least to a reasonable level. The EFCC boss has directed that all operators in the Nigerian financial system, especially bankers, must declare their assets latest by June 1, 2021, as this measure will sanitize the country's financial system. Nigeria is one amongst many countries in Africa and other continents, battling with cases of corruption and money laundering with bankers and bank officials as accomplices. Aside this, some monies have remained redundant in many accounts due to the deaths of owners of the account, which some bank officials convert to theirs while leaving the families of the account owners in penury. Part of the essence of this move by the EFCC is set to ensure that the country is free from financial crimes, also to block some of the loopholes being exploited by unscrupulous players in the sector to undermine the Nigerian economy through money laundering and illicit financial flows. Now, how will this correct the anomalies experienced in the financial sector? How far will this go in curbing money laundering and illicit financial flows in the country? These are some questions guests on NTA's Good Morning Nigeria will be answering shortly.
Many thanks, Oyemi Ajayi, for that background. Joining us now to discuss this issue here in the Abuja studios, we would like to welcome Ahmed Abubakar Tanimo. He's a legal practitioner, former banker, and still a human rights activist. Delighted to have you this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. Joining us via Zoom is Professor Segun Ajibola. He's a former president, Chartered Institute of Bankers of Nigeria. Ajibola, pleasure to have you with us this morning, Prof.
Good morning.
Okay.
And joining us from our Kaduna studio, we have Professor of Accounting and Finance, Kaduna State University, Mohammed Sani Bello. Welcome to the program.
Good morning.
Welcome.
Okay. All right. We hope to be joined by another guest in the course of the conversation, Nadabo. Once we get him via Zoom, we'll also bring him on for this conversation. Let's begin with Professor Segun Ajibola, the former president, Chartered Institute of Bankers of Nigeria. Well, this piece of legislation has always been there. It was first enacted in 1986 under the military, effective in September of that year. But, of course, Nigerians are more familiar with assets declaration by public officers, that's to say civil servants, and those who work in MDAs, that's departments and agencies of government. Have bankers always been aware of this legislation? And if they were always aware, what, in your view, was the level of compliance?
Bankers, to some extent, maybe let me start by saying that our own generation of bankers, when we joined the profession in the late 1980s, we were handed that particular form, which we completed and submitted. But somewhere along the line, as we've always experienced in this part of the world, the implementation of that particular provisions of the law was more or less abandoned, and it was no longer considered as maybe a fundamental part of the banking profession. But some years back now, these particular provisions of the law were revisited, and as of today, bankers are being made to complete that particular declaration form. But more importantly, Mr. Moderator, the industry itself is also a self-regulating industry, because we do know and we appreciate the fact that it's a very, very delicate industry, very fragile, very tempting, that there was need for that self-regulation. And that is why my institute, the Chartered Institute of Bankers of Nigeria, has its own way of regulating, because we have a code of conduct which we agreed with the Central Bank of Nigeria, which every banker in Nigeria must sign. And we have a disciplinary tribunal that has the power of a high court, that whoever is reported for any form of infraction, if dragged before the tribunal, can be sanctioned and recommended for formal prosecution. But that will not replace the provision of this particular act, decree, which is now an act of 1986. The law is there, and the law is expected to be implemented. The provisions should be implemented. But then, to that particular provision be isolated? Nigeria as a country, we have a lot of challenges in so many areas of our national life. What's happening in the custom, what's happening in immigration, what's happening in the civil service, what's happening in police. So it is the practice of isolation, which perhaps we'll have opportunities to talk about later, that is giving us some apprehension in the industry. Because as of today, even we are scaring away the young ones from going into that profession. But I think we will come back to that. But if there is a law in place, law is expected to be implemented, and provisions of law are expected to be obeyed. So we don't have any problem in bringing to bear the provisions of that law for full implementation and full compliance. We don't. But where we have our concerns and our apprehension along the line during this program, we will come out with that. We will encourage and we will recommend that we don't practice implementation by isolation. There are provisions of law for every category of professionals in Nigeria to declare assets. There's code of conduct bureau. To what extent are those who who should be accountable to that code of conduct bureau? To what extent are they complying? And what is the posture of EFCC to this kind? So banking as a profession need not be isolated. But like I said, Mr. Moderator, we'll come back to that later. Thank you.
Okay, Professor, let me just hang on to you a little bit and then maybe make a follow-up to what you said. We all agree that the law has been there, and you also rightly accepted that it has been, being complied with much earlier on at the beginning. But somewhere along the line, it became abandoned, and the Chartered Institute of Bankers, regulates and, of course, have some checks and, also, of course, look at the behavior and attitude of those in the banking industry. Could you tell us why it was abandoned and what really the CIB did about that before it became now somewhat like a topic to discuss?
Yeah, thank you once again, Mr. Moderator. Like I said, banking as a profession had its own challenge. And that is typical of any profession, whether you are talking of medicine, whether you are talking of construction, whether you are talking of civil service, whether you are even talking of the academia, in which I'm a member. There are always bad eggs in every profession, and there should, first of all, be a policy of self-regulation before we even talk about the national laws. So since the 1990s in particular, when the challenges of the banking industry became a national problem and the big assault on the economy of Nigeria, the banking profession itself, through the institute, has been making efforts to deal with infractions, to deal with untoward practices, to uphold the code of conduct of the profession. And that is why some years back, we agreed with the Central Bank of Nigeria. We signed a code of conduct which must be signed into by everybody that is into the banking profession in Nigeria. And we now have, through CIBN Act 2007, a tribunal that has the power of a high court to deal with bankers as have been found wanting, especially in the area of ethical conduct and discipline. But the problem we have, Mr. Moderator, is the fact that the banks themselves, they hardly, it's on very few occasions that we have reported cases of infraction by bankers to the institute. We even have a bankers subcommittee on this matter of unethical practices. So, but the reporting system is still very weak, in which case we have infractions that are not reported to the institute to even enable the institute to take action. And that is why I'm saying ours is supplementary to the national law. So whoever is caught in the act, either promoting money laundering or even within the banking system, trying to pursue things that are not helpful to the industry or to the economy, should be made to face the law. So nobody will contradict that kind of posture. But like I said, the only issue there is we need not stigmatize the industry. We need not let the industry look as if it is the scapegoat within the system. We need not let the institute look at it as if it's the only national headache, because whatever, irrespective of our position as an economy, we need the banking industry. In the academics, if you ask me today, the enrollment into banking has been going down over the years. And when you ask the youngsters, oh, that industry where they pursue everybody, that industry where the MD, the executive director, the managers, they find their way into the prison and so on and so forth. So at times, we celebrate and we over-celebrate the problems in the industry to the exclusion of other areas of the aspects of our national economy that are either equally challenged or even more challenged. So it's that policy of isolation that we are talking about. Infraction is infraction. Unethical conduct is unethical conduct. Whether you are in the practice of medicine, whether you are in building and construction, whether you are in the police, whether you are in the army, whether you are in custom, whether you are in immigration, whether you are in civil service. Let's treat infraction as infraction, as a national problem. Like somebody asked, if you are talking about even Central Bank of Nigeria, that are there infractions there, you are talking about First Bank of Nigeria, there infractions there. What of NNPC?
Allow him to
what of other major national institutions? To what extent have we held people responsible for accountability in these institutions? So let's have a national architecture that will pursue infraction, irrespective of which industry you are. But like I said, I admit the fact that banking profession is with a special toga, wear special flavor, because of the delicate manner and because it touches on every facet of our national life. So that way, it holds the key to national development, and nobody should joke with it. But in our attempt not to joke with it, we should not stigmatize it. That's all that I am saying.
All right. Thank you, Professor Ajibola. I want to bring in Abubakar Tanemu himself, a former banker and also a legal practitioner. Listening to Professor Segun Ajibola, the impression that he creates is that the directive to bankers to comply with the pre-existing piece of legislation amounts to stigmatization. And he also says that that's a way of also isolating bank employees and then ensuring that they are the ones who are in the limelight. Do you agree with this posture?
No, I don't. If you look at it, you have to look at it from a holistic approach. Before now, the challenge has always been there. As he rightly pointed out, in the early 80s, late 80s, they were complying with the asset declaration thing. But after a while, they stopped, and we know the result. We had issues of failed bank. The government had to constituted a decree, failed bank tribunals, and a lot of banks went under. A lot of people lost their resources. What the essence of the law, before any law is made, we have to look at why is there a need for it. We call it the spirit behind the law. The essence is that they want to know your standing at the point of your employment. After maybe series of years, what have you amassed in terms of legitimate earning? Is it commensurate to the lifestyle you are living? You'll be shocked that most chief executive officers of banks, they compare themselves like governors. They have convoys, they have chain of policemen guiding them. Their accounts, you see, apart from their salaries, their allowances, most of the transactions that they finance, some of them, which I can attest to, some of them are direct beneficiaries. So, and then if you are talking of fighting money laundering, what other better source do you need to go to for you to be able to contain money laundering than the people, the players in the sectors? If they've been doing it, I joined the banking sector sometimes around 2007, 2008. For the better part, I stayed close to about 9 years. I never declared any asset because we were never asked. That's the truth. And I've moved around like 3 different banks. We were never given. And from time to time, I do, this law is there. There's a form. Why is it that nobody cares? Even the code of conduct asset nobody is doing a follow-up to it. So the issue of stigmatization is not, we shouldn't over-sensationalize it. The fact is that you are being given your salaries, and the salaries ordinarily should be adequate, but an average banker, even from the earliest point of their calling, they don't live within their means. The expectation of the society, they want you to live above board, they want you to wear fanciful suits, lifestyle, big cars, and their income is not commensurate to all those lifestyles. So apart from loans, then they now start conniving with customers. Those customers are always there that wants to like beat the system. Everybody in one way or the other is linked to the financial sector. So you must make use of a bank in one way or the other, either for deposit, either for various transactions. So some of the bankers now help themselves in the sense that they provide the customer. You'll be surprised you see a customer depositing 9 million in different trenches so that you won't beat the regulatory limit that the NIFU will now pick up. Who is giving him that advice? It's the bankers. Some is even the bankers themselves that will go to various branches of the bank, depositing the same amount of money so that at the end, maybe a politician, a politically exposed somebody that is working in a ministry that you know definitely does not have the capacity to amass such kind of wealth. You are the one that is helping him to layer those monies and putting them in such a way that it will not raise the red flag. So the fact remains the same, that before now, nothing is being done about asset declaration for bankers. A lot of bankers, from the highest cadre down to the lowest level, they were living above their means. A lot of them, as I rightly pointed out, either loans, either from the deals that they've been able to arrange for their customers, and so because you don't have the necessary tools, the regulators, they cannot know what a person worth if there is no declaration beforehand, and that declaration is what has been missing. The CBN, as part of their responsibility, the NDIC as part of their responsibility, over time, they don't really focus more on that aspect. And in the fact that now we are in a technological era whereby if you have such kind of data, you should have like a platform. If it is the CBI, if it's the CBN, even if it is the EFCC, just as the way you report the threshold of deposit on a daily basis, there should be a platform whereby all bankers in any bank the regulators can be able to access that platform and see and know the declaration made earlier. So until that is done, we will not be complaining that the bankers are being stigmatized. These are necessary tools that the government is trying to like activate because they've been there before, but it has not achieved the desired result. For every major corruption or looting scandal, there's a banker somewhere that has facilitated the whole transaction. People don't keep billions of naira ordinarily at home. It finds its way through the financial system. So the financial system in every clime ought to be highly regulated for stability of the financial sector. If you relax that calling, then there will be a lot of problem because they have the know-how, they know the means, and they interface with those people that have the ways of having it. So it's a gradual thing. They are starting from bankers. I subscribe to his own idea that it should be a holistic approach whereby it cuts across every profession, every sector of the. Everybody should be able to declare his assets as at when due, and if somebody is now living above his means, the authorities can now make reference to what he has declared as his legitimate income. We cannot not only for looting or for corruption purposes, equally for issue of paying tax and other considerations.
Well, thank you so much, Ahmed Abubakar Sanimu. Good enough you are out of the banking system, and that's why you're talking like that. And of course, you're a human rights activist, so it's nice that we have you in this discussion this morning. Let me get across to Mohamed Sani Bello. Let's hear your views about this stigmatization issue which has been raised. We are not saying that it's the prof that raised it alone, because going through the papers and going through the media, one could have read or should have read that some of the associations in the banks and the unions in the banks have been kicking, or rather a sort of, complaining about this very directive from the EFCC. What's your take on this, and how do you look at the issue of trying to have every other sector, every other segment of the Nigerian society accountable to their actions and their deeds?
Thank you very much. I think there are two things we need to consider. The issue of involving every other sector, and then making the bankers' asset declaration effective. What I know is that I was a banker, and at a point in time, I think when I was in UBA particularly, the all banks, we were given forms to declare our assets, but nothing is heard afterwards. So it's like declaring the assets is one, but making it serve the purpose for which the declaration is made is another. So the AFCC activation of the 1986 Act regarding banks employees to declare their assets is a good one, but it should not stop at just declaring assets. What happens afterwards is very important. I have suggestions on that. Then the second issue has to do with every other sector. I think what we need is really to have the unexplained wealth order in Nigeria to also come into force. And by that, every individual who is known or is seen to be having some kind of way of living or some wealth that are not necessarily explained from, what is seen to be his or her legitimate earnings, can be called upon to explain. And that will involve every other person, not necessarily bankers. It could be bankers, it could be the custom, as other speakers have mentioned, and everyone can now come into fold. But with either the unexplained wealth order or the now bankers declaring their asset, what is required to make this declaration effective, are the following. Number one, we need to involve EFCC or any other agency involved in this, must involve experts. Experts, particularly accountants and lawyers, who can now understand, can help in the review of such declaration to see whether they were reckless, or to see either there are evidence of misstatement or a deliberate false declaration, and then to now propose what action can be taken thereafter. This is very important. If we don't do that, I am not sure that EFCC can, collect all the forms declared by bankers and on its own can review all the forms and then detect some of these lapses that may be there. As we know, people have motive. Some may under-declare, some may over-declare, depending on what they do. And in any case, we also need to know that bankers can hold asset or can own asset, not necessarily, declaring through proxies. They can do that. So, but some experts, there are ways we can detect such kinds of activities. So this is one. Secondly, there is need for collaboration between particularly the FCC and the Code of Conduct. Many, politically exposed persons have been made to declare assets at the time they are, assuming office. But afterwards, nothing is heard. There is no connection between the EFCC and the Code of Conduct. And it's like anybody can just do anything except if you are picked upon as an individual or there is certain special interest on you. Nobody, is interested in whatever any other person has declared and is kept with the Code of Conduct. So there has to be some kind of collaboration. And that way, the unexplained wealth order, which I am proposing, can be activated. If you say you have this, then how much have you paid in tax? Or, what is the source of money that you have used to acquire the asset, and things like that. The last thing that is required to make this kind of effective after the asset declaration is the involvement of whistleblowers. Whistleblowers can just be individuals anywhere, and anybody within the community or within the society or in any place or within an organization that is suspected to be living above his or her legitimate earnings, a whistleblower can come into play and then say that, look, I am suspecting so person is actually living above his or her legitimate earnings, and then that way the FCC will be informed. Any other agency of government involved either in money laundering or in dealing with issues relating to financial crime can come into, can act on such kind of information provided by whistleblowers. So overall, it is important that the 1986 Act relating to bank employees declaring their asset, it is important that it is activated, but it has to be made effective. If you just declare your asset and then it is filed away, and that is all, unless there is problem, then something will happen, or there is a special interest on an individual, then that is when investigation will commence. I think that will not, that will be futile.
All right, Professor Mohammed Sani Bello, thank you very much there for your incisive comments. Let's return to Professor Segun Ajibola, formerly of the CIBN. We understand that his Zoom connection is off. All right, Professor Ajibola, can we see you again one more time? If you are on. All right, so you're back on, Professor Ajibola. Let's, again, for the benefit of our viewers, clarify this. What we are more familiar with is assets declaration by public officers, public officers include civil servants and politically exposed persons and those who work in departments and agencies of government. They are required to declare their assets every 4 years. Now, for political office holders, upon their appointment or upon their election before they assume office, they are supposed to declare their assets, and upon their exit, they also make another declaration. And this declaration is not a trivial thing, by the way. It is done on oath. In other words, there is execution and attestation before a high court judge, or some other superior officer of the law. So it's a serious business, and the agencies that you refer to, whether customs or immigration, they are already covered by the Code of Conduct Act with regard to the declaration of their assets. Now, having listened to the comments by the other two guests, Professor Ajibola, would you still insist on saying that, look, bankers are being singled out, considering also that the role bankers ordinarily should play in the fight against corruption?
Moderator, let me correct one impression. I think you got me wrong. I did not, and I will not admit that EFCC posture is stigmatization. Hear me very well, Mr. Moderator. All I said was that let it not look as if we are stigmatizing. That is not my own position. But let's not convey, what I'm saying here and what I'm recommending is, let's not convey that impression as if we are singling out a particular segment of the professions. There is nobody, no sincere, no honest Nigerian today that will want to oppose any attempt at sanitizing the system. Banking industry in particular. And that is why I said every stakeholder has been very worried and very concerned. The Central Bank, NDIC, Chartered of Bankers of Nigeria, and that was brought about, that code of conduct for bankers. So nobody will want to say that it is not the right step. Sanitizing the system, fighting untoward practices, and punishing infractions. That is needed like yesterday. But what I'm saying is this. First of all, let it be an holistic approach. Like you rightly said now, Mr. Moderator, we have the Code of Conduct Group, we have the provisions that bring civil servants, politically exposed persons to this business of asset declaration. What is the level of compliance? If the level of compliance is low there, as it is low in the banking industry, let's fight it together. Let's not isolate banking alone. That's all I am saying. Then let us run away, my learned friend, because I'm also a lawyer. The comments, the impression I got from him, let's run away from fallacy of generalizations. Not every banker, please, is a rogue. And not every lawyer is a saint. So let's run away from giving the impression that whoever is associated with banker is already associated with a roguish profession. Let's not give that impression. There are fine gentlemen and women in banking, as we have in lawyer, as we have in custom, as we have in medicine, as we have in civil servants. And there are bad eggs in those professions too. Let's fight everything together. Let's see what we can do as a country to sanitize, whether you are a lawyer, whether you are an accountant, whether you are a customs.
All right, there seems to be some interference there, Nadabo, to the audio of Professor Segun Ajibola. Professor Segun Ajibola, I will just get Tanimu to respond to some of those issues that you've touched on, along with the suggestions by Professor Muhammad Sani Bello as to how to make this more effective. But let's clarify some point. We're taken out from the reported story that the EFCC chairman, after his meeting with President Muhammadu Buhari, said, look, June 1st, 2021 is the deadline for bank employees to submit their assets declaration form in compliance with the Bank Employees Assets Declaration Act of 1986. And nobody is saying that nobody is stigmatizing bankers and saying because bankers are XYZ. It's done that on the basis of saying, look, we want to strengthen the fight against corruption. Tanimu.
To correct with the impression he had, I never subscribed that all bankers are rogues, because I saying that would be a generalized statement. There are very good bankers, very honest, very patriotic, and some of them are the people that are at the forefront of exposing some of these mega cases of corruption that we've seen the EFCC making headway. We have very dedicated, some of which we know personally. And equally, even in legal profession, majority of the legal professional, the expectation is that we are noble, we are honest. So, but in every system, there are bad eggs. You don't allow the system on its own to set the measures to check those bad eggs. You have to complement the effort of every stakeholder. If the EFCC are coming up to resuscitate an existing law that has been there over years, that has not been effective. Mind you, the CBN, the Bankers Committee, these are organizations that ordinarily ought to have given effect to those, but it appears that there is element of collusion. I say collusion in the sense that if you have regulators that are depending on the people that they are supposed to regulate, if you have the CBN now as a regulator depending on the bank to supply them information, and is that information that they will use to now examine. So you ask yourself, why do you have failed banks barely some months whereby the CBN and other regulators have given them clean bill of health and they only turn up to be failed maybe in the next 6? Because certainly it means the information supplied by the banks were not accurate, they were doctored. Before now, you see how some other banks are declaring huge billions as profit, and within a short while they are under. It's because the way the system operates. So what is required is we should not complain that there are checks, there are measures being put in place to the AFCC are taking proactive steps. We should not be waiting all the time for the act to have been committed before you start going after those that have perpetrated the act, because as at then, monies will have been lost, a lot of energy will be disseminated. But if you prevent it, if you take proactive approach by setting laws that are there, you are resuscitating them and making them effective, it will go a long way in crime, in the fight against criminality. It's not only you are sending a deterring message to other prospective would-be deviants, so that they know that the logger of the law is already taking shape and taking form to prevent the occurrence of such kind of activity. So we will commend the EFCC, we will commend any government agency that wants to effect existing laws that have not been given effect in the past. The CBN, the NDIC, the other regulators, they've not fared very well in that regard, and that is why it's taking the EFCC to now give effect. If the banking sector is sanitized, it will have a ripple effect on all other sectors of the economy.
Oh, well, many thanks, Sanimu, for that insight. We really appreciate that. And we've been informed that one of our, conversationists, Dr. Simon Ignatius, is already with us, and he's joining us on Zoom. Simon Ignatius is a senior lecturer, Department of Jurisprudence and International Law, University of Lagos. He's also a consultant on corruption and assets declaration. Simon, let's hear your own views. You're just meeting us midway, I would say, in this conversation. We've been talking about asset declaration as directed by the EFCC onto the bankers in order to see to it that by June 1, they comply with that. But the issues being raised and being discussed here have been that this is not a new law, and of course just a resuscitation, and then some insinuations from other quarters may seem to point towards the fact that it's a stigmatization or singling out the bankers in order to do that. I don't know. What's your view about this very directive, and how do you see it, being, implemented? Has the EFCC not been that magnanimous?
Thank you for the opportunity and for the question. I realize that the EFCC is reactivating or trying to reactivate an existing law, trying to implement the Bank Employee Declaration of Assets Act of 1986. The provision is there. It's not a new law. It has always been there. It is good that the EFCC is trying to use it to for good effect, for good reasons. But my worry is that the bank essentially is a bank owned, not really, it's not owned by the bank, by the government per se. Although the government has some shares in the bank, it's a private organization. Let me put it largely. But despite that, we have we are talking of combating corruption and money laundering, trying to make the banks or the bankers to declare their assets. But we have existing laws on public officials declaring their assets. And most importantly, the provision that thrills me is the provision on just enrichment or on just or illicit enrichment. Section 7 of the Bankers Act, of the Act of 1986 stipulates that, and even Article 20 of the United Nations Convention Against Corruption is explicit on the provision for illicit enrichment. Even the existing law on the EFCC Act, Section 7 of the EFCC Act, empowers the EFCC to investigate persons whose lifestyle do not commensurate with their means of income. Now, my query is this: why single out bankers? Has the EFCC exhausted itself in focusing on the public sector corruption? Statistics have it that if you are looking for those who plunder the assets of the country the most, they are the public officials, politically exposed persons. The Code of Conduct Bureau is there. The Act setting it up has made provisions for asset declaration. How many per year? How many persons have been prosecuted or investigated? How many public officials have been brought to book on account of false declaration? I just believe that focusing on the bank ordinarily is okay, but I'm looking at the parity. Is it equitable for you to now focus on the banks to the exclusion of other sectors? I just feel that the EFCC is looking for soft targets. The bankers, they are employees of their various banks. They just have to fill it, otherwise they will lose their jobs. But how about the politically exposed persons, those in the political public sector, who are plundering the assets of this country every now and then? And this brings me to the issue of politicization of the enforcement of the anti-corruption, politicization of the corruption war. Because you find out that the EFCC, I'm sorry to say, the EFCC has become, it's not fair, it's not even-handed anymore. Petitions will be written to the EFCC that so persons supported with facts and evidence that they have done this, they have done that. EFCC will just sweep it under the carpet simply because the persons involved are in the right party, or they are in the good government, in the good records of the government. But if they are so-called enemies of the government, they swoop on that person and on the assets. And EFCC has not used these provisions. Article 20 of the UNCAC 2003 is a convention, and the EFCC Section 7 of the EFCC Act, empowering the EFCC to investigate persons who have assets that are over and above what they legitimately earn. They have not used it against public officials. EFCC is a public body. First of all, you have to look at your scale of preference. You know the assets that we lose every day. Nigeria loses every day to NDAs. The EFCC has not focused, it may not even have the manpower to focus on these areas, first and foremost. Even the banks, on the other hand, they even self-regulate. They self-regulate, at least to some extent, or to a large extent. Why is the EFCC living? For me, I believe it's deviating from its core areas of concern to Nigerians and going to the bankers, soft targets. So that is my concern, sir.
Well, Dr. Simon Igbenedion, thank you very much for your position. I was just wondering, before you came on, Tanimu did mention the fact that we have a plethora of instances where some persons in the financial services sector, including bankers, are known to be accessories to the looting that you just referenced. The EFCC chairman himself also did say that at the end of the value chain of corruption, that's to say money laundering or otherwise, you find a financial intermediary. And some of these financial intermediaries are said to be bankers. You say they are a soft target. Now, assuming you have gun crimes all over the place, and you want to go after the gun runners who are supplying the armories to the criminal elements that are firing the guns, would that be a bad idea? And in any event, if a person is deemed to be an accessory, and in this case, nobody is being deemed to be an accessory, if it is the evaluation that these persons might assist ultimately in the fight against corruption that is, according to you, prevalent amongst politically exposed persons, why not also go after these perhaps low-hanging fruits?
Well, yes, the banks, they are financial intermediaries. They are there to work for their clients or to assist their clients in whatever they want to do. But if they are just intermediaries, they can be accessories. That the banker is acting as such does not mean that whatever money, if he assists a politically exposed person, it may not be the case that the assets, whatever he has gained there, may be found in his personal account. It is possible that in the line of duty, in doing that which he ought to do, he may not be benefited personally from the transaction. What my take is that you get the principal actor. The principal actor involved in corruption, ground corruption, or money laundering is the politically exposed person, the public official who has access to public assets. Then it is he that brings the money to the bank, and the bank is to do its job. And of course, mind you, the Money Laundering Act was set up to empower or obligate the banks to do the needful, to carry out necessary due diligence. In their line of duty, they do that. But in the course of doing that, if you find them to have personally benefited, fine, that is just by the way. But the main culprit is there. So many are there around. You have done nothing against them. So why are you looking at the intermediary? Without the initial plunder, without the resources taken out from the MDAs, the bank will have no money to handle. So why not tackle the problem headlong first before moving swiftly on the banks? That is my take.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Simeon. We thank you for that insight. And let's now go over to Kaduna and then meet Mohammed Sani Bello. Earlier, you mentioned the unexplained wealth, order, which it's generally acclaimed and accepted worldwide as, a force that should be put in place in order to check corruption. And of course, you talked about the whistleblowing, tactics to be brought to use or to be brought to force in order to ensure that these, negative practices are being, checked. Now, do you really look at this vis-a-vis what other, conversationists here have said? Do you see this as another way of trying to enhance the EFCC fight? If yes, how would the EFCC approach it? Not forgetting about the fact that you mentioned, rather suggested the involvement of experts in executing the directive. Now, looking at all this, don't you think the EFCC too have experts that would really do this job, and of course the whistleblowing thing being resuscitated by the EFCC, or how do you mean?
Okay, I think first and foremost, let me also say something regarding the comments made by other panelists on this issue. You see, bankers, I think the spirit behind the 1986 Act is because bankers have fiduciary responsibility to a number of stakeholders. So, right, if you can see that right from 1986 we could have an act, then it means it is in recognition of that fiduciary responsibility which bankers have. No other, probably all the other people about politically exposed person, the public servants, they don't have that kind of fiduciary responsibility as much as bankers have. And because bankers have fiduciary responsibility, the need for them to declare their assets so that in the course of their job, they are not found to have, amassed certain wealth that, will be illegitimate, is very important. So I think this is what, differentiates the bankers from other, types of employees or public servants and others. Even though we have more of them now in the privately owned banks, that fiduciary responsibility is sacrosanct. They have it, and so what they do involves a number of stakeholders, and one of the stakeholders is government, and it is agencies like the AFCC. And to that extent, we cannot fault the AFCC for really bringing up this matter and wanting to reactivate the 1986 Act with regards to bank employees declaring their assets. Having said that, I'm not sure the FCC has the right manpower and the capacity to deal with this matter as it is. If after bank employees declare their assets, how much time does the EFCC has, and what level of competence and expertise does it have to be able to really go through those declarations and then bring out areas or issues that really will need, further immediate investigation? That I'm not too sure, as I said, and that is why I am recommending for the involvement of experts, which can, those that can be outsourced. The FCC can outsource those experts to help in really cross-checking these things, because otherwise it will just be a declaration of asset that is kept, and as some are insinuating, if somebody has problem either with government or with some individuals that are powerful within the system, that person will be picked, and then his asset declaration will be called to question, and that will just be the end of the exercise. But what we are saying is experts can be involved so that we can really be thorough and cross-check every aspect of the declaration made, and if there are areas or individuals who, present something that is suspected to be false or incomplete, or, there are red flags, we can detect them, and then some action can be activated afterwards. The same thing with the politically exposed person with regards to the declaration of asset required by the Code of Conduct Bureau. The lack of involvement of experts into the whole thing is making, the exercise cumbersome and rather ineffective. It just becomes a routine kind of thing that is done, and you hear nothing afterwards. So we believe that we must, make good use of those asset declaration, either made by the bankers, bank employees, or by other, people who are required to declare their assets in the public. And aside from even the asset declaration, when you now activate the unexplained wealth order and then the whistleblowing, and you make them to work together, even those who are not required by law to declare their assets, that is private individuals, once you are seen to be evidence of ostentatious living, people can now say, look, we are suspecting so person, is not living according to to his or legitimate means. If the person is a business person, you don't know when the person got a contract, or you don't know when the person is doing any trading activity. All of a sudden you see the person building houses, or anything that will create some kind of suspicion. Those kind of things, the whistleblowers can come into play, and then the unexplained wealth order should be able to cover those kind of areas, so that it is a Nigerian issue, and it's for all Nigerians.
Professor Sani Bello, thank you very much there again for your points. But let's bring in Professor Segun Ajibola one more time. Prof, we're getting pressed for time, so I would like you to be as brief as you can in response to this question and any other points that you may wish to articulate. I was just wondering, the piece of legislation that we've been discussing, that's the 1986 Act, of course, it's 35 years old. It's not the oldest piece of legislation in Nigeria, but some persons would worry about some of the provisions therein with regard to assets declaration by bank employees. One, there is a requirement that this declaration of assets be done every year. Isn't that too cumbersome in the first instance? I mean, public servants are required to make the assets declaration, that's the civil servants, every 4 years, and politically exposed persons at the point of entry and also at the point of exit. But if you don't require bankers to be doing their assets declaration every year, it's almost like filling your tax papers. Isn't that cumbersome? That's one point. Second point, it's also the nature of employment in the banking sector today. In your time, of course, there was more stability of employment, but these days, I don't want to get into the conflict that the NLC has with banks. You have contract employees, and these persons are said to be employed by other recruitment agencies and just deployed to banks, and therefore not necessarily bank employees, even though the definition tends to cover them.
Thank you very much for these very, very important questions. First of all, like I said earlier on, banking is a very, very fragile profession. Banking is very central to everything that we do as an economy. So maybe that is why the law says, and like my learned friend said, the intendment of the lawmakers. The law says, because of the nature of this industry, let it make it a yearly affair. But like the last commentator said, EFCC as an
Tanibu, I was stuck there. Tanibu, you want to respond to that very quickly?
Briefly.
The EFCC as an agency, they lack the capacity and the competency to be able to handle it. We should look at it as a stepping stone.
It's back? All right, sorry. We understand it's back. Yeah, Prof? Like the elements are conspiring against you. Let's hear you again.
Do they have the resources to even carry out this? That's number one. Number two, Mr. Moderator, who is a banker? Or if the law says a banker, who is a banker? I expect the law to step back a bit and clarify the issue of who is a banker. Because somebody is just from school, is a supervisor, is an officer one or whatever. What power does he have, he or she? To what extent can he or she influence transactions? So there is need for even to draw the line. Is it from a manager, from senior manager, or from whatever level? Then the third issue is in the industry today, we are still fighting the issue of contract staff. So a contract staff in a bank that has spent a number of years, is he a banker? Even the law specifies who is a banker, the CIBN Act 2007. So we need to define certain things. We cannot make it generic. By the time everybody that works in a bank branch, everybody that wears child shirt and tie and goes to a bank, does such a person come under the law? So EFCC doesn't have the resources, as we all know, to even monitor this exercise on a yearly basis. We need to work on that. Maybe it requires a legislative amendment.
Okay. Thank you so much, Prof. We thank you so much for that insight that we really appreciate. We thank you once again for being part of this program this morning, and we also must thank Alhaji Ahmed Abubakar Tanimu, former banker, human rights activist, and private legal practitioner. Thank you so much for coming. Professor Mohammed Sani Bello, we thank you so much. You've joined us from Kaduna. It's our pleasure you've been with us. And some also, the same gratitude goes to Simon Igbinedium, who joined us from Lagos. Thank you so much for being part of this program this morning. We'll now take a break. Stay with us.
Television Authority, we just dealt with our first topic, which is on assets declaration by bank employees. And now we are coming to, again, another issue related to the financial services sector, which is the launch of the Nigeria Quick Response Payment System. This is said to be a homegrown device, or a homegrown approach to payment systems. And we have a guest who is joining us from our Lagos Network Center. But kindly let us know who you are and what your role has been in the launch of what has been described as a revolutionary homegrown quick response payment system.
Okay, good morning and thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. My name is Bolanle Enigboko. I am from the Nigerian Interbank Settlement System, NIPS PLC. This morning, we'll be talking about the launch of the NQR solution, to the nation. The NQR solution really is a very reliable, fast and secure QR code system of payment. A QR code typically looks like something that you can see on my screen now. It's just typically a very safe and effective way of making payment, riding on a contactless technology. This is being pioneered by NIPS PLC in conjunction with the financial industry, to the entire nation. Thank you.
Tell us some more about this. It's unique. This is not the first payment platforms that we are having. So what is unique about this?
The NQR solution is very, very unique in the sense that it runs on 4 major pillars. The first is that it is driving financial inclusion and contactless payment system, being advocated by the federal government of Nigeria as well as the Central Bank of Nigeria. It is also very unique in the sense that it is safe. Remember that with the global pandemic that has ravaged a lot of countries in the world, people are now preaching safe and secure ways of transacting. So the NQR itself is very safe because it's just the ability to scan and pay without touching anything is contactless. And thirdly, it is also a means of providing very cheap way of delivering service to businesses and of course to individuals as well, because the cost of service is very low, is very affordable. And again, just to mention that all over the world, QR payment is becoming the real thing. A lot of countries in the world like China, Bangladesh, Singapore, and very recently in Ghana have also launched this QR code. So Nigeria is not an exception. With all the progress that we made in financial technology, we also think that this additional payment channel will help to augment the existing digital offerings that we have in the country today.
Mr. Bolale, you are the head enterprise support services of Nigerian interbank settlement system. And you've been in the market, in the Nigerian economy, part of the Nigerian, the financial system in this country. May we know why you decided to come up with this? Are you saying that the payment systems in this country have not been sufficient, have not been up to date, have not been serving Nigerians properly? Why this NQR?
Actually, the payment systems in Nigeria today have actually been very helpful. Remember that over the years, there have been evolution of several kinds of payment, and we've had payments from the banking on movement to ATMs to POS. We've also had instant payment already, being done in the country today. And now what we are just offering is an additional, means of making transactions. Like I said, it is to support the financial inclusion drive of the federal government, also being championed by the Central Bank of Nigeria today. It is helping to promote digital access, by customers to all these financial offerings. So it is never too much in a country where you have over 206 million Nigerians. You just have to keep up by coming up with very safe and secure ways of doing, businesses. And like I said, the advent of the COVID pandemic has also made this innovation to be very possible, in the sense that we have to think through of very safe and secure ways of doing, transactions without having to touch anything. So riding on this contactless technology, the NKR solution comes very formidable, and it comes very handy to business owners, in along the fact that it's very cheap and as well very affordable.
Okay. Thank you very much, Bolonle Onigbokon. Now there's a second guest, of course, who is seated with you there in our Lagos Network Center. This is Mrs. Akwaugo Silva Ezeboke, I believe. She's head Institute Team 1 Nigeria Interbank Settlement System. We saw her a moment ago on the screen. If you can hear me, Mrs. Silva Ezeboke, just give us your own insight into this NQR and what it tends to achieve as part of the evolution of Nigeria's financial technology applications.
Very much, Mr. Moderator. NQR has just come at the right time, because given the pandemic and the need to ensure that we continue to do business and we continue to operate in the economy while keeping safe, it's just at the right time for us to have a service that allows us perform payments without touching shared surfaces. So with NQR, all that is required is just to access your bank's mobile application, scan the QR code, and complete your transaction within your own mobile application on your own device without having to touch something that another person has touched. And as you rightly pointed out, yes, there's been payment services in the country, but it's a big country with a lot of consumers, and the consumers are not yet fully served. So it's a solution that we also brought into the market to get more people into the financial services space, to serve more people and generally improve the lives of Nigerians by economic participation.
Just for the benefit of some of our viewers, if not most of our viewers, just walk us through how this NQR system is intended to operate. I mean, people are familiar now with their ATM cards, they are familiar with the POS, they are familiar with the ATM machines, even though sometimes you go there, there's no money. Sometimes you go there, you get less than what you wanted to get at. So how does this intend to work with the NQR system that you just are describing for us now?
The very first step is that a merchant or anybody who needs to receive payment is given a QR code by their bank. And the banks can do this by printing out the QR code, or even on the same applications or channels that your bank has given you. It can also be presented over the web. So the first thing is that a bank or any other CBN licensed financial institution gives the person who needs to receive payments frequently a QR solution. Thereafter, all that is required is that any payer can access their bank. And this, when I say bank, I mean commercial banks, I mean microfinance banks, I mean every institution that has been licensed by the Central Bank of Nigeria to provide financial services in that regard. So you access the normal applications that your bank has given you. You come in using the security that has been put in place by your bank, you scan the code, and you pay. So 3 quick steps: access the application that you have to pay, scan the code, enter your security details, and you pay. So that's the way it works. Very simple, very intuitive.
Mr. Bolale Onigbokun, Head Enterprise Support Services, Nigerian Interbank Settlement System. She just said 3 quick steps. And, in Nigeria, we have some, little problems here and there, talking about technology, light, power, and the rest of them. How quick are these steps, and how user-friendly is the NQR to Nigerian customers?
NQR solution is very user-friendly, and there are quite a number of use cases, that can apply to whether you're a small business, you're a potato seller, you are an Okada rider, you are a boat driver, Uber, or you have a small boutique. All you need to do is to get to your bank and you get onboarded on the NQR process. So there are 3 types of QR codes that we have. We have the static QR code, where you have the fixed amount. You have the static QR code, where the amount can be variable. And you also have the dynamic QR code. And I'll explain some of these use cases. So for a trader or a hawker that sells gala, all he needs to get is a QR code sticker pasted on his gala pack, so that if anybody buys a gala or anybody buys from a newspaper vendor, right, once you make the payment, the payer can just scan the QR code and make. So you don't need to ask for account number. You are not asking for the bank details. All you need to do is just to scan the QR code and you make payment. So it is very fast. For a boutique owner, once you have done your shopping, all you need to do is to go to where the QR code is displayed. The payer scans it, he imputes the amount, he authenticates with his PIN. And I need to mention this because the security around this is that the payer himself has to authenticate that transaction, probably using the PIN or using the biometric that is enabled by his bank. So it is very easy. All you need to do is to scan and you authenticate with your payment. And we are also seeing a lot of use cases around the lifestyle of people. I'm sure recently we also saw a video where in a party, rather than spraying cash, we saw people just scanning the QR code, and making payment. So it cuts across all different use cases in the Nigerian market today. And it's very simple to use, and just simply by scanning and pay.
But Ali, finally, how secured really?
Sorry, please, let him clarify this point.
Which one?
Bolale, the one of spraying, because I saw the video. Somebody just carried that. Is that one your own system that they were scanning the thing and the money was just entering their account without actually spraying?
QR code, and it's just typical of what we are describing this morning, the NQR. So you don't need to even spend cash anywhere. All you need to do is that once the QR code has been displayed, all you need to do is to scan and pay. And like I said, the NQR code already has the account information masked into that barcode-like structure that you're looking at. So you don't need to ask for account number, you don't need to ask for the bank details. All you need to do is to scan the QR code and you input the amount, and the merchant or the receiver receives instant value. Another thing I must mention is that on the NQR platform, the merchant or the individual or the business owner receives instant value, unlike some of the other payment systems that you have around, where they have to wait for 1 or 2 days to receive their value. On the NQR solution, the value to the merchant is instant.
Well, those things, I mean, there are other implications. I'm sure that those ones, they will deal with them going forward, because there have also been instances of, let's say, pre-existing measures, POS, instances of failure, POS, persons have also been attacked, and so on and so forth. But it's the efficacy that is critical. And so on that note, we'd like to thank Bolale Onibokon, as well as Mrs. Akwago Silva Ezemoke, for explaining to our viewers the new NQR that is just on the market. I'm sure it will take a while. We all get used to it. Nadabo?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Alisa, you're welcome to the market, and we wish you all the best.
That's right.
That was Good Morning Nigeria for you today. We thank you so much for watching. Join us tomorrow. Good night.
I'm Kingsley Osadolo.